All right, if you're in the college recruiting process and you have anywhere from like 10 to 30 schools on your target list that you are interested in, I want to walk you through why that's probably not going to work out well for you and you're likely to not get the results that you want. So, I recently talked to a family and they had 12 schools that they were pursuing. And when I asked them, "Hey, is there any wiggle room on that? Like are those just like the top schools that you're interested in or are those the only schools that you are willing to contact?" And they said, "No, those are the only schools that we are interested in." And immediately, one, I told them, "Great, not a good fit to work with us." But the second thing is I told them, "Listen, you're very unlikely to succeed in this process with that number of schools." And the mom was kind of taken aback and she said, "Well, why is that?" And I'm going to walk through in this video 4 reasons why that's an issue. Okay. So the first one is the obvious one, which is that it's a small window. 12 is an incredibly small number in the recruiting process. And I would argue, after working with hundreds of athletes, sending millions of messages to college coaches, we have a lot of data on this. I would say anything under 30 would be considered very, very small. Anything under 50, you're still playing with fire. Over 50, you're okay, but bare minimum 100 is going to put you in the best case scenario, no doubt about it. Okay. And don't worry, I'm not naive. I know that you don't have 100 schools that you are super excited about. I know that. All right. Stick around for the video. You're going to understand why this is important. So the first one is that it's a small window. Okay. For anywhere from like 10 to 30 schools, the odds that you get a significant number of those to respond and show interest in your kid is incredibly low. Okay. Typically, you're going to see anywhere around a 10 to 13% response rate in the college recruiting process to emails and DMs. Now, that might be significantly higher if your kid is incredibly talented, or depending on your position in grad class, how early or late you are in the process. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But you're looking at anywhere from a 10 to 13% response rate. So for easy math, let's use 10%. If you contact 12 schools, 10% is how many? 1.2 schools. You're getting one response, right? One of those 12 schools. And that's if everything is perfect. Your video's perfect. Your school list is great. Your script is great, right? Everything is dialed in. You're just not likely to get a lot of interest. Same with 30 schools. You're looking at 3 responses. That's just not life-changing in the recruiting process. Assuming that 30% of schools that you talk to are going to give you an offer, which again is a ballpark number, but around what we would see. That means if you're talking to 1 school, you're not getting any offers. And if you're talking to 3 schools, you get 1 offer, which means you just sort of have to take that offer in the end. You don't really have like a choice of schools that you get to go to. You're forced to go to the one that you have an offer from. So the easiest way to get more traction in the recruiting process is to simply contact a larger number of schools. Now, you might say, "Well, Jack, I'm not interested in more than those 12 schools." Well, the first thing I'd say is, all right, then I guess you're just doomed. Like you're just doomed, and that's going to be your issue. But for a lot of families, they're open to contacting more schools than that. It's not just 12 or 30, but those are the ones they would most prefer. And in those cases, the second thing that I say here is, great, then what we need to do is contact more schools to get leverage that we can use against the ones that we want the most. Okay. So if there's 30 schools that you're really interested in, we go contact 80. Okay. Now I know that the other 50 schools are not high on your list. You're not going, "Oh my gosh, these are my favorite schools. I would commit there tomorrow if they gave me an offer." But a couple things ring true about those 50 schools. The first thing is that if those schools express interest, you can use that interest to make the 30 schools that you really want more interested. When you get later in the process, all right, and you have offers from some of the 50 schools, but not from the 30 schools, you are able to go to the 30 schools and say, "Hey, talks are ramping with some other schools. I have offers on the table. Just want to know where you guys stand and if I'm on your recruiting board or not." And we've had that conversation hundreds of times with college coaches. And sometimes they will come back and be like, "Oh, shoot, okay, we'll have an offer for you on Thursday." And then they come back and they give an offer. And the only reason they felt compelled to give an offer with urgency is because of the offers that we had from the 50 other schools. The second thing I'll say about those 50 schools is, I've seen this so many times, I call it the ugly duckling to swan, which is that a school that a kid is not that excited about, or parents are not that excited about in the beginning, ends up becoming an amazing option that they're stoked about. And so how this normally goes is that the school will express interest in the kid, and the kid is like, I'm not that excited about the school, but it's cool to be wanted. So they end up getting on the phone with the coach, and they hit it off with the coach. Love the coach. And the kid is like, man, I love the coach. I don't love the school, but I love the coach. I wish that coach was at a different school. But over time, they end up building a relationship with that coach. And the coach says, hey, I'd love to get you out on campus. And your kid, maybe because they don't have a lot of traction at the time, says, all right, fine, I'll go on the visit because I really like the coach. Then they go on campus and they see that it's totally different than they thought. They go, this is way different than I thought. This is actually pretty cool. I wouldn't mind being here. And all of a sudden, the ugly duckling becomes a swan, and they become so excited to go to that school, and it's a great fit. I've seen that happen countless times. If you had only contacted the 30 schools, your kid would have been robbed of that opportunity. All right, so there's so many reasons to venture outside of the initial schools that you are interested in, okay? The third thing here is what I call double down. This is a little bit more strategic. One of the ways that we are able to generate what I would call a ridiculous amount of interest in the recruiting process for kids who are not as talented as maybe some of the top players is through the double down method. The double down method basically says you contact schools at every single level. Once you see which divisions are the most responsive to you, you double down on those divisions. So if I contact D1, D2, D3, NAIA, and JUCO, and I get the most responses from D3 and NAIA schools, then I go back and I do a second campaign outreach to just NAIA and D3 schools, and we do it on a much larger scale. And because we already know that we're capable of playing at those schools, because that's what the market has told us, then the whole campaign blows up. We get a whole bunch more interest. This is how we've had D3 athletes talking to 50 plus schools. And when you hear that a kid is talking to or getting recruited by 50 schools, you immediately think, oh, that kid must be incredibly talented. Top D1 athlete, they were going to get recruited no matter what. No, I'm saying that that's happening for Division III caliber athletes, not Division I caliber athletes. And the way we do that is through the double down method. If you only contact 10 to 30 schools, you're not going to be able to use the double down method, because when you spread those 10 to 30 across 5 different divisions, you don't have enough in each division to get an accurate read. If you're doing 10 schools and there's 5 divisions, that's 2 schools per each division. It's not statistically enough to get an accurate read. Even 30 is not enough. That's 6 schools per division. That's not enough, right? The bare minimum there is like if you do 100, that's 20 schools per division. Okay, we're getting closer, right? If you do even more than that, again, we're getting an even more accurate read. And then we could go back and we can double down on those divisions, which guess what? Is going to accelerate your recruiting process. Part of the reason that so many people's recruiting processes take so freaking long is because they're constantly banging their head against a brick wall that's never going to move. They keep targeting D1 schools when D1 schools are telling them they're not interested and they're not capable of playing there. If they had simply said, all right, let's go see who's interested, and then we're going to double down on those divisions. By the way, this doesn't mean you can't hit D1 schools, because we've had players who are going to do the double down method, but they're getting interest from D1 schools. So guess what we double down on? Division I schools, right? So I'm not saying that this automatically puts you into a D3 NAIA JUCO category. I'm saying let's see what the market says, and then we double down on that. If you only contact 10 to 30 schools, you're not going to be able to apply that theory. You're just not. And you're going to miss out on the benefits of that double down strategy. Then the last reason here why I think contacting 10 to 30 schools is a very poor strategy is what I call no momentum. And no momentum, when you are not generating traction in the recruiting process, it is likely that your kid will become disheartened. When they're not getting recruited, they're going to start to feel like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not good enough. I don't really want to send emails anymore. I don't really want to make videos anymore. And their recruiting process is going to tank, and that tends to snowball in the negative direction, in the wrong direction. When you contact more schools, you are more likely to get responses, even if those are from coaches who are not your favorite, schools that are not your favorite. You're still getting momentum that gives your kid some life in the process to continue putting in the work to make this happen. You're buying yourself more runway with your kid. If you only contact 10 to 30 schools, you're very unlikely, based on the 10 to 13% reply rate, that's on average, you're very unlikely to get a large amount of traction. And that's going to result in your kid being very disheartened in the process. So I highly recommend that you contact more schools, if for no other reason than to give your kid momentum so they feel like they're making progress, which will allow them to continue doing the things that are going to help them get recruited. And I've seen this over and over again. Families just get way too narrow, way too fast. You don't go narrow and then over time go broad. You do the opposite. You go broad and over time you get more narrow. And that's going to set you up for success way more than anything else. But I wanted to share this story because I talk to a lot of families. We talk to a lot of families as a company who get so narrow in the beginning, they are setting themselves up for failure right off the bat. And there's a lot of families that think, if I go outside of my 10 to 30 schools that I'm interested in, then I am settling and I am only pursuing schools I'm not interested in. But for all the reasons that I just mentioned, that's not true, okay? And you're actually doing your service and your process a favor, right? Like, you're doing yourself a favor by doing that. So highly recommend that you contact more schools than that. Just wanted to share that. If you're a parent in the college recruiting process and you want help navigating the process, we got a 5-phase system. It's been working like gangbusters. Today's Tuesday. On Sunday, we had 3 players alone commit. One of them with an $80,000 scholarship. The other one with a $200,000 scholarship. Third one, I don't remember what that was. Point is, if you want help in the recruiting process, there's a link in the bio. You can apply, see if you're qualified. If you are, you can schedule a call with us. We'll walk you through the 5-phase system. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time.